So Joe Manchin and Chuck Schumer have an agreement. Woo-hoo! I mean, as David Dame points out in his piece in the American Prospect, which I'd encourage, as always, everybody to check out, it's been almost a year to this date since Manchin and Schumer signed that secret agreement in the middle of these Build Back Better negotiations, which
and then made everyone go through a farce of
right.
negotiations for an entire summer.
Even though secretly Manchin was only willing to go to a $1.5 trillion number, they got it down to that, and he still wasn't on board with it. So forgive me if I'm a little skeptical about this agreement, but it does seem like this time might be different. I say that with trepidation, but because Manchin seems to, I think, be feeling the heat a little bit more than he normally does, and he gets to brand this as a way to combat inflation, which is his whole thing now.
Sure.
So back when that was being debated, that was a $1.5 trillion figure. This is much lower than that, the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. And before I get into it, though, I do want to give Schumer a rare piece of credit for strategy on this front. Maybe not even the content of the bill, but he wanted chips passed really badly, the semiconductor China competitive bill, which has a needless jingoistic framing, but that's a way to get Republicans on board. And honestly,
also, Nancy Pelosi's husband likes one of the chips bill passed too.
Oh yes, he does have investment in that.
Just sold off all of his Nvidia stock at a loss.
Interesting. Yeah, people should look into his. There's a whole like Reddit forum, I think, for his stock portfolio. It's a great way to make money if you follow that. But they waited to announce the agreement until after chips passed the Senate over the filibuster threshold. There were, I think, 17 Republicans that joined on board with it so that the reconciliation route could be preserved for this. And I do think that they actually fooled Mitch McConnell into believing that the Manchin and Schumer agreement, that the shadow of Build Back Better was dead, because if he wasn't fooled, he would have whipped his caucus, I believe, to vote against chips, to force the Democrats into a reconciliation, going down the reconciliation path with that particular bill, which would take away that option for this new bill. They took away McConnell's leverage by hiding the ball to that degree. And I think that is backed up by this clip here of Senator Kennedy, who went on Fox News to talk about how they've been duped, which is, a rare moment of schadenfreude for Democrats to see Republicans get outmaneuvered on something for once.
But the timing of the Senator Manchin deal, I don't think was any accident.
What do you mean?
Well, the Democrats had some of my colleagues in the Senate agreed to support the 400 or 390 or 290, whatever it was. I can't count that high.
280.
Subsidy to big tech. Okay? And so they couldn't have passed that bill without Republican votes. So the Democrats, well, basically, they sucked my Republican votes up like a Hoover Deluxe and then got their votes and then, bam, announced this new tax increase.
Double cross.
I don't think there aren't very many coincidences here on Capitol Hill. I think that the timing was exquisite. We look like a bunch of, well, I'm not going to say what we look like.
Haha, sorry. Love it. I mean, look. There's nothing in either the CHIPS bill, which is a corporate giveaway for semiconductor manufacturing as a way to create some jobs here in the United States, but there's no assurances after we're giving taxpayer money to these companies that they are going to do such a thing. It's just more of like a pinky
those
promise.
Companies then.
Yeah, if we want to give public money to them, we should get something in return. That's what Bernie Sanders said. He was the lone member of the Democratic caucus, I believe, to not support it in the Senate. And he's right, but it did pass. And that later that day, Manchin and Schumer announced this agreement. So Kennedy is right there that it was strategic, and they got.
I think so. I think the one thing I'm worried about is the degree that this is performative, and it really all depends on if this actually goes through.
Yeah.
Because if not, then I could very easily imagine that Kennedy is going on there and squawking a little bit and acting put upon because he's doing a solid for Manchin or even Schumer.
I think Sinema's going to be the bigger problem.
I think the strong issue is that I was saying this to Matt earlier, is that Manchin has always been more amenable to the tax increase part than the climate stuff, and Sinema's the opposite.
Yes.
So the concern is, will she?
What are you eating?
I was eating a protein bar. The concern is it's my 12:10 breakfast.
Yeah, I got you.
Usually she is the one who has been opposed to any corporate tax increase or any higher tax increase, as opposed to the climate provisions. But then also we have to think about the mod squad in the House too. Gottheimer, Mikey Sherrill, Tom Malinowski, all of the New Jersey and New York Democrats who will not vote for anything that doesn't have the salt provision in there.
Yeah, great point. I think that there is still a long road, but for what's in this bill, as I mentioned, last year it was 1.5 trillion. This year, according to Dayan's reporting, and I'm sure he was up all night looking through like the hundreds of pages of text on this, 433 billion. So significantly less. What it does is it extends the ACA subsidies for 3 years. It limits drug pricing reform, allows for Medicare to, not limits it. It's limited drug pricing reform that allows Medicare to negotiate with pharma on a few drugs, but not
piddly stuff. I mean, it's important.
Not insulin.
It's going to help, I'm certain in individual cases.
And it's for seniors too. Like it caps $2,000 on seniors' annual out-of-pocket cost for prescription drugs under Medicare. Yeah.
It's like we're gonna untie this hand that we tied behind our back.
Right.
Like,
but like at the same time, I want these things to go through, and I think in particular the climate stuff is like it's all meant to incentivize the private sector. I'll get to that in a second, but what the other good parts are: $80 billion in IRS investment, which is good. So that's a way to cut down on tax dodging, and Manchin wants that as a pay for, which we've discussed on this program you don't really need, but Manchin is committed to that. It also has a corporate minimum tax, which I need to look into more, but it seems pretty weak. That's another pay for that Manchin wanted. The one thing I think that is kind of good in this is there's a funding for a direct e-file tax return system, so you don't have to go to TurboTax and pay out the, I don't know, how much does that cost? Like $100 a year to file your taxes through there.
Maybe,
yeah, this would be a way for people to do it directly through the government. But Bradley mentioned this about Sinema's potential role in this. There was a tweak in this to a carried interest loophole, which Sinema wants to protect naturally. That was one of the things that she hung her hat on. It extends the holding period on the carried interest loophole from 3 to 5 years, but that's shorter than the length of most private equity deals, which is where this would be felt most acutely. Those are usually 5 to 7 years. So it's easy to circumvent. And so maybe that's designed to get her on board. It's just window dressing. And the climate stuff, at least there's something there. It's targeting a 40% emissions reduction by 2030, but much of it is just, again, private sector incentivization and investments in fuel neutral energy. But I think way too much of an over focus on carbon capture, which is just a way to appeal to Manchin, right?
Right.
Carbon capture technologies are not serious.
Like, I would love it if they were, but they're not.
It's not. It's not a viable way to move forward. And then, of course, electric and zero emission vehicle credits. And
no, it seems like
that.
essentially the extraneous stuff is what is appealing to Manchin, in the sense of like the deficit reduction planks and the carbon capture planks to add on with the other kind of more benevolent stuff. It's like, let's put the BS in there basically for Manchin to be on board and feel self-important.
And it's not worth, I think, celebrating. I think like it's fair enough if the best of this gets through and passes. It's like, okay, this is an example why it's better to have Democrats in power than Republicans. It's still absolutely not up to not sufficient, and maybe even makes future action harder because Manchin's got his stuff.
Yeah.
Right. So like, fine if it passes. I'm not going to give any of these people credit until it does, and even so, it's not enough.
Yeah, just remain vigilant, folks.
Of course. And now I just keep thinking about how much we're going to see of Josh Gottheimer on TV.
He's getting that short king is tightening his tie.
And then we can wonder why. And then we can wonder why
So
people
many
are
beverages.
alienated from politics, because we have to go from Manchin to Sinema to Gottheimer. Like this is insanity.
These ghouls at the gate.
Bought fuses for capitalism, as Matt Christman points out. They replaceable people who are just serving like the carried interest concerned crowd.
Right. We have to protect private equity mergers.
Justice for private equity.
Justice. Yes, Queen.